Hello, this is Krishna Keshav with the Stockton Science of Life Club. We'll be talking about the harmony of the sciences and humanities, specifically of the natural sciences, philosophy, and religion. So modern science came out of what was called natural philosophy. That started from the ancient times of Aristotle. He's known to be the father of biology, even though modern biology is more known to be related with Darwin and Mendel. But then the scientific revolution, which occurred between 1543 and 1687, we see a lot of the main individuals who are credited with being the fathers of various schools of thought that pertain to our modern conception of science, such as Francis Bacon, who was born in 1561, credited with being the father of early physics. Galileo, born in 1564, being credited with being one of the fathers of modern science in general, in addition to physics. Rene Descartes, who was born in 1596, he gave us the Cartesian plane, the XY axis. He's known as the father of analytic geometry and also one of the fathers of modern philosophy. And Isaac Newton, born in 1642. Along with Galileo, he's known as one of the fathers of modern physics and classical mechanics, also of modern science. So we see how all of these figures are being born and living during this scientific revolution, and much of what we know today is founded in the teachings of these four, and something that all five of them have in common is that they're all theists, actually. They're all working within what was known as natural philosophy, and you'll see that in a minute. And they're all theists. So they all have a belief in God, and that belief in God is strongly seen in their conception of how science operates, actually. So this first quote is from Francis Bacon, from his work in 1597, Meditations Sacrae. I believe that's translated as Meditations on the Sacred. He says, "I dare affirm in knowledge of nature that a little natural philosophy, in the first entrance into it, doth dispose the opinion to atheism, but, on the other side, much natural philosophy, in wading deep into it, will bring about men's minds to religion. Wherefore atheism every way seems to be combined with folly and ignorance, seeing nothing can be more justly allotted to be the saying of fools than this, there is no God." So that's a pretty strong statement. We can see how Francis Bacon believes and understands that the more one gets into natural philosophy, gets into scientific thought, that the more and more they become aware that there is a supreme being. Also, Sir Isaac Newton, in his 1687 work called in English, The Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy. In short, it's called Principia. He says, "This most beautiful system of the sun, planets, and comets would only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. This being governs all things, not as the soul of the world, but as Lord over all, and on account of his dominion he is wont to be called Lord God, Pantocrator, or universal ruler." So we see here that actually Newton is thinking that we see the hand of God in the movements of the celestial bodies. This is also something Aristotle thought. He understood that the celestial bodies, as stars, are moving in a systematic and a consistent way. How they're revolving, how they're circling in the solar system, etc. They're moving in a very specific way, in a very law-like way. And he understood that in order to follow a law, there needs to be some intelligence. We see every day that a lack of intelligence often leads to not being able to follow laws or follow rules. And so Aristotle is thinking that because the celestial bodies and stars are following these laws of motion, that there's some intelligence there. So now we have some big questions in modern science. This is coming from Scientific American and Nature, which are two of the biggest journals here in America for science. Out of the 6 big questions that they highlight, this Science of Life Club will be concerned with mostly these 2. What is consciousness and how did life begin? So concerning the approach and the consideration of this club, we are interested in a systematic, rational, and holistic approach for understanding reality, inclusive of consciousness and life, and the genesis of life, the origin of life, which recognizes unity of mind and matter, res cogitans and res extensa, embraces the plurality of logic observed in biological and chemical and mechanical systems, an a priori consideration of the infinite whole of reality by and for itself, and consideration of absolute thinking activity in the prime mover. So this first point about mind and matter is referencing the Cartesian plane. The Cartesian petition. Rene Descartes separated mind and matter, saying that although they interact to some extent, they are not connected at all, that they're 2 separate substances. And this created a lot of problems and was one of the main things that allowed modern science to become strictly empirical, because they're operating on the notion that matter is completely separate from mind, and so they can just analyze matter and come up with conclusions that are what they think are true about the totality of reality. But the problem is that our direct experience tells us that mind and matter are not disconnected. Before we raise our hand, we have to think about it. There's a direct connection between mind and matter, so we're not able to actually make conclusive realizations or come to these conclusive realizations about reality and nature unless we recognize the unity of mind and matter. The second point about the logic in biological, chemical, and mechanical systems. So again, modern science is very mechanical. It's a mechanical science, meaning that it's reductionistic. Modern science reduces everything to what they see as its most basic parts. They understand the parts, and then they think that they can understand the whole by just combining the understanding of all the parts. But this kind of approach is only true of mechanical systems, and an engine, things like that, anything mechanical, where it's true the parts, the whole does make up, the totality of the parts is the whole. But in biological systems, it's much more than that. If you take a living person and you take all the parts of that individual off and away from each other, take the arms off, take the head off, take the legs off, when you put it back together, it's not going to be the same, right? It's going to be dead. It's a dead person now. It's not a living person. So there's a much different, there's the way the living person operates is much different. Also, as far as mechanical thinking goes, when you throw a paper airplane, you can analyze where it may go based on physics, based on geometry. You can actually predict where the airplane will go. But if you have a living bird in your hand, and then you open up your hand and you let the bird fly away, there's no way of predicting where it's going to go because the bird is subject to spontaneous movement based on its own will. So there's a lot more that goes on with biological systems than there is with mechanical systems. So we're thinking that there is a problem with this strictly mechanical, reductionistic, and empirical approach to modern science. It needs to be more inclusive of what we experience, of the conscious experience, which is not material. A priori consideration of the infinite whole of reality. So this is getting at, a priori means beyond direct sense experience, arriving at a conclusion based off of logic, even if we can't directly perceive it with our senses in an immediate way. So we understand that we experience many things out in the world around us and in our environment, and we can understand that there is a totality to reality. Even if we don't know what the content is of that totality, we don't know everything about the universe or multiverse, whatever is there. We don't know about the specifics of everything, but we can understand that there is a totality to it. And so people like philosophers like Hegel talk about the infinite reality, the whole of reality being by and for itself. So does Spinoza. And we'd like to talk about that topic a bit more and get into the details of it. And then finally, consideration of absolute thinking activity and the prime mover. Absolute thinking activity is something that Hegel talks about. What that means, it gets more into this mind and matter and understanding what the relationship between the two of them are, and understanding what the development of mind is from nature to mind into spirit. And then the prime mover. This is something Aristotle talks about, which is very similar to the conception of pantocrator, which we just read from the quote by Newton. That intelligence that is behind the movement of everything. Aristotle breaks it down into three concepts: dunamis, entelechy, and energia. Dunamis is matter, lifeless matter that does not move. Energia is movement, and entelechy is that force or that thing that makes something that is static, that doesn't move, that makes it move. What is that inherent thing that makes it move? In some cases, yes, it's an external force, as modern science knows well, but in relation to biological systems, it's an internal compulsion, right? It's not just that living bodies move because something outside of them pushes them or something like that. There's some internal force that drives them to move. So what is that? We'd like to talk about that. So now we're here talking about the harmony of science and religion. Both science and religion are deeply concerned with life. Some people say that religion considers the why of life, while science considers how. If science promotes knowledge of how life has come to be, and this explanation denies reason, purpose, or the why of life, by invoking chance and randomness as a causal factor for the development of life, and this further suggests that life comes from matter, or abiogenesis, then it is misleading people. Because we are observing organized systems of various kinds of, we are observing various organized systems throughout nature. And it's irrational to think that an organized system which consistently operates in a specific way is a result of chance or randomness without an additional organizing factor. So an example of this is if you want to see a sandcastle, you can't just take a handful of sand and throw it in the air and expect it to just fall into the shape of a sandcastle. That would be relying on pure chance and randomness to organize a system, a mechanical system of some kind. Instead, if you want a sandcastle, you have to use your intelligence to organize the sand in some specific way. So it's not enough to just rely on chance and randomness. There's some intelligent organizing principle that is necessary for any organized system, whether it's mechanical, also whether it's chemical or biological. We're seeing all these chemical processes go on inside the body, inside cells. Cells are living organisms. There needs to be some life which organizes things to shape a certain way or to operate in a certain way. So also, life coming from matter has never been empirically observed. Thus, it is an unscientific conclusion. And this is true. There has never been any experiment in any lab that has demonstrated that lifeless matter can generate life. It's never been done. If mainstream religion promotes knowledge of why life has come to be, and this explanation is dogmatic in nature, thus denying processes of reasoning and rational development, i.e., how, then it is not truly representing or considering the infinite nature of God, the absolute truth, within which all aspects of our experienced reality and beyond can find their purpose and be harmonized. So the scientist Louis Pasteur is the one who actually disproved spontaneous generation with his swan neck flask experiment. You can look it up. Basically, people thought that small life forms like gnats or something would generate off of decaying meat, raw meat. So he did an experiment that had one piece of meat with some gauze around it, exposed to the air, exposed to the elements, and then another piece of meat inside a swan neck flask, which basically isolated it from the environment. So the one that was exposed to the environment, some gnats, some small life forms did come off of it, and the one that was isolated in the flask, nothing came. So he was able to draw the conclusion that something from the environment, basically another life form or a gnat or something, came and laid the eggs on the exposed piece of meat, and that's why life is generating from it. And then the piece of meat that was in the flask, no insects could come onto it, so nothing came from the meat. So he was able to prove in that experiment that matter is not the origin of life, but life is always the origin of life. It has to come from another living being. So the Princeton BVI SES is working to scientifically establish the empirical observation that life comes from life and that matter comes from life. Every day we observe living beings only coming from other living beings, cells from other living cells, children from living mothers, etc. And we see that matter is generated from life also. Our hair and nails grow for 100 years if we are alive, but when we die, these processes also shortly cease. We see tiny living seeds generate matter to become huge trees, yet if you kill the seed before planting it, then no matter will generate. So these two concepts, that life comes from life and matter comes from life. As we said, all life comes from a life that precedes it. This is something we observe every day. We can see here that the baby kangaroo can only come from a living mother. The same thing is true of the smallest living organism, of the smallest life form, I should say, a cell. It's only coming from another living cell. It can't come from a dead cell. Likewise, a child, a baby, cannot come from a dead body. It needs to have life. Also, matter comes from life. We see a very small seed, living seed though, it's alive, there's life in it. When you plant it, it will generate, that life generates the matter to become a huge tree. But if the seed is dead, if you put it in the toaster oven before planting it and you kill it, then that same seed will generate no matter because you killed it, the life is gone. So again, we're seeing how matter is coming from life. Also on our own bodies, we're seeing our fingernails and our hair growing for essentially the entire duration of our life. But when we die, those processes also stop. So these are empirical observations, actually. By scientifically establishing that life and matter come from life and philosophically considering the higher development of this observation, as discussed in both Eastern and Western, ancient yet relevant traditions, then a non-sectarian and holistic understanding of how and why life can be established in a way which is accessible to modern-day, truly critical thinkers and seekers of the truth. Such a non-sectarian and holistic understanding of life is the aim of the Princeton BVI SES's activities, as well as the aim of the harmony of science and religion. The Stockton Science of Life Club strives to openly discuss and consider these matters with faculty and students. Here we have two quotes. The first from Albert Einstein, someone who's recognized to have a very superb intellect. All religions, arts, and sciences are branches of the same tree. All these aspirations are directed toward ennobling man's life, lifting it from the sphere of mere physical existence, and leading the individual towards freedom. So even Albert Einstein recognizes the unity of these arts, of these paths of knowledge, branches of knowledge, as he says. And then German philosopher G.W. Hegel, he teaches in his philosophy that the ideal of beauty is, as expressed in art, is the same ideal of truth, which is expressed through philosophy and science, or sought through these things, and love as cultivated through religion. So now just to highlight some aspects of our modern day society where the harmony of science and religion is very relevant. At the University of Edinburgh, there is a master's degree program in science and religion. The website is up there at www.ed.ac.uk/divinity/graduate-school-taught-MSc-science-religion. A little bit about their program. Our dedicated master's program in science and religion is highly distinctive in European universities. It aims to inform and engage with the debate in depth, looking at it from a scientific, philosophical, historical, ethical, and theological perspective. As such, it can be approached from a variety of disciplines, and we welcome prospective students with a good first degree in a core science subject, such as physics, chemistry, or biology, or a core humanities subject, philosophy, history, religious studies, or theology. No religious commitments are assumed or expected, rather an inquiring mind to grapple with critical challenges from all directions. Since the current science-religion debate is strongly shaped by the claims of Christianity, these will be explored in depth as they are relevant. But many other religious and non-religious perspectives will be featured too. Much of the noisy debate about science and religion has taken place within a poorly informed view of the history and philosophy of science and its relationship within religion. The program provides a strong grounding in these issues. The history of science will be studied from ancient times through the modern scientific revolution, together with philosophical trends in our understanding of reality. In addition to the main core areas of dialogue between science and religion, they will be explored in depth, including cosmology, evolution, divine action, miracles, consciousness, and the human person. Also, the nonprofit organization, the John Templeton Foundation, is working to fund many different avenues of research and education and media presentations, etc., regarding the harmony of science and religion specifically. So this is in reference to one of their many funding areas, which is called Science and the Big Questions. The Science and the Big Questions funding area supports innovative efforts to address the deepest questions facing humankind. Why are we here? How can we flourish? What are the fundamental structures of reality? What can we know about the nature and purposes of the divine? In keeping with the Foundation's motto, how little we know, how eager to learn, we value proposals that exhibit intellectual humility and open-mindedness. We welcome requests from individuals and institutions who are inspired by relentless curiosity, willing to challenge common assumptions, and eager to advance the frontiers of human knowledge. In addition to supporting academic research on these and similar questions, we support efforts to bring relevant findings to non-specialist audiences. Through a wide range of media, print, digital, broadcast, and film, we seek to raise awareness about the cutting-edge discoveries in ways that are clear and probing. In addition, we fund programs that help teachers, journalists, religious leaders, and other professionals apply these discoveries in ways that enrich and extend their work. Over the next 5 years, from 2019 to 2023, we will be devoting approximately 80% of our funding, which is approximately $325 million, in the Science and the Big Questions funding area, which has 12 strategic priorities. These priorities are dynamics of religious change, religious cognition, science of purpose, public engagement, intellectual humility, cultural evolution, science of character virtue, programs in Latin America, mathematics and physical sciences, health, religion, and spirituality, science-engaged theology, and programs in Islam. More about this can be seen at www.templeton.org. Also, the Templeton Foundation gives an annual prize away called the Templeton Prize. And this past year in 2020, Dr. Francis Collins, who is the director of the National Institutes of Health since 2009, was the recipient of the 2020 Templeton Prize. The prize honors individuals whose exemplary achievements advance Sir John Templeton's philanthropic vision, harnessing the power of the sciences to explore the deepest questions of the universe and humankind's place and purpose within it. Dr. Collins led the Human Genome Project before becoming the director of the NIH. He has been an established and respected scientist for over 40 years. Dr. Collins is actively engaged in the harmony of science and religion, as seen in the YouTube video In Praise of Harmony, Francis Collins' 2020 Templeton Prize Address. So just some concluding thoughts about the Bhaktivedanta Institute of Spiritual Culture and Science, who helped to organize this club. And also we'll talk about some of the goals of the club itself real quick. The Bhaktivedanta Institute of Spiritual Culture and Science is a 501c3 charitable nonprofit educational organization in Princeton, New Jersey. Our mission is to scientifically establish that life and matter originate from life. To execute this mission, we advocate the harmony of science, philosophy, and religion, as well as considering the role of consciousness in modern science. Our approach embraces Eastern and Western thought, especially the Bhagavad Vedanta philosophy and G.W.F. Hegel's conceptual realism. Through annual international conferences, a variety of web content such as blogs and email groups, and weekly community programs, the BVI SCS provides educational resources for the public. Continuing productive dialogue concerning these topics is paramount for the positive progression of modern science and scholarship in general. The Stockton Science of Life Club is a participant of the BVI SCS's Circles of Life Community Initiative, which coordinates groups at the local level within universities and among global communities to engage in such productive dialogue. More about the Institute can be seen at www.bviscs.org, and on Linktree you can see some of the various newsletters and blogs also with many very rich educational posts. So that's at linktr.ee/BVISCS. Finally, about the Science of Life Club. Our goals are to organize a conference during the spring semester of 2022. Such topics would be the role of consciousness in biology, chemistry, and physics, the plurality of logic among mechanical, chemical, and biological systems, interreligious dialogue, philosophy of science, cellular, sentience, and more. Also, we hope to inspire students to carry these ideas and discussion onto their next academic pursuit, whether that's graduate school or their professional community. If you have any questions or any interest, if you'd like to ask, how you can get involved, please give me an email. Send me an email. My address is here, and also the Stockton Science of Life Club website is here. Thank you very much.